There, now I see it. There we go. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending here. I just wanted to kick this off a little bit. If you have attended the previous two sessions, the intent was to kind of talk about individual parts of a grazing system, and then this morning we're going to talk about how the management of those two parts, the animal and the grass or forage base side, kind of work together through your management, and how different management activities can affect how the grazing operation works. And so I think this is something that we all really would prefer to discuss in person and have a good discussion. And Kate, I guess we didn't get to ask you before the presentation, in terms of questions. Wait till after, or do you want people to chime in the chat? The audio is muted, so people aren't able to speak the questions, but there's a question and answer section and also the chat that people can put questions in.
Yeah, they can chime in during. That's fine.
Okay.
You guys can stop.
Yeah, so all along, either Michelle or I will kind of chime in if there's questions along the way. So feel free, if you have clarification questions or anything like that, feel free to just put them in the chat, and we'll hopefully get to them. So I guess without further ado, we're going to start off talking about nutrient management with Kate Parsons. So take it away, Kate.
Okay, so nutrient management's really, I feel like, one of the keys for grazing management. So we're going to go over today soil testing, soil sampling, soil testing interpretation, and recommendations. So just for a real brief background, I kind of serve as Damon's role in Massachusetts, providing technical support to our conservation planners with grazing and soil health and agronomy. So, and do have a dairy farm and a small beef herd that I have done some rotational grazing with over the last 5 or 6 years. The nutrient management starts with, like I said, soil fertility testing, and there's 4 components to that. The first being the sample, which you're surely familiar with, and then there's the extraction and analysis, and then interpretation of the results. What does that mean? And then the recommendations. And this slide here was from John Spargo. He used to be at the University of Massachusetts, and he's now at Penn State. So with soil sampling, I'm sure most people have already taken samples, but just real briefly, you want to split your samples into your fields into different samples based on similar management history, soil type, drainage, past yields, any concerns like that. Typically, the maximum area the labs recommend is about 15 acres. So you see, and you want to avoid sampling right on field edges. So, I wouldn't be taking my samples right along the edge, and neither would I want to take any of the samples or the cores in, a place where you had stockpiled manure or maybe fed bales. If your intent was to get an idea of the whole field, you don't want to take cores in those odd areas. And so the theory is to zigzag throughout your area and take 15 to 20 cores. Us splitters will probably take 30 or 40. I know my father and I take a while to take samples. But, the more samples, really, the better to get a more accurate sample of the area. You're going to mix that together and submit a subsample, about a cup, it seems like most labs are recommending. You always want to remove the organic material on the surface. You don't want to be submitting manure or thatch or compost with your sample. So, you're just trying to get down right to that mineral soil. And for pastures, I used to see 3 to 4 inches. Now it looks like most most the labs are recommending about 4 to 6 inches when you're not tilling the soil. So for a established pasture hayfield. And don't sample right after fertilizing. You don't want to get that fertilizer into your sample. Consistent timing too. So if you take your soil samples in the spring, well, typically you'd want to continue to take them in the spring in the future so that you're comparing apples to apples. A lot of people recommend it in the fall. It gives you more time to plan for the next season. Get lime out if you're planning to do some seedings in the spring, and then sample at least every 3 years. So the extraction part, so you send your soil into the lab, they're going to screen it and air dry it, and then they're going to mix it with a solution. And that solution is called an extract or an extraction solution. And it's designed to remove the immediately available nutrients plus a portion that's expected to become available during the season. So most of New England uses the modified Morgan extract. And this has been found, they've done past research with it to correlate well with our soils. It's a weak acid, and New Hampshire is the oddball. And then along with the mid-Atlantic and maybe some of the more Midwestern states use the malic 3. And that's a strong acid. So you'll see with the result, it extracts more phosphorus than say would typically be available here in the Northeast. So the lab does their analysis, their extract, and then they're going to report a number to you. And so, for example, you've looked at tests and you'll see soil test of 10 parts per million of phosphorus. Now, for a 6-inch soil depth, you can multiply that by 2 and you get 20 pounds to the acre. But I don't want you to get confused. That doesn't mean there's 20 pounds to the acre of phosphorus available in the soil. You might think, okay, hay removes about 100, I got 20. I need 80. No, it doesn't work like that at all. It's just an index value. And that index is really kind of meaningless if you don't have these soil test levels, these, very low optimum and above optimum levels that correlate with that soil test level or the value. So these soil test levels are based on research where applied nutrients produced a response. So a very low, you're going to have lower yield, low, a little bit higher. So you're going to see a response to that nutrient being applied at these levels. So when you get to the optimum level, that's the point which more fertilizer is going to be a low probability of producing a response for yield. So this is an important way to understand what the soil, how to read soil tests and what they mean. And then with the recommendations, so that lab takes their values and their soil test levels, and then they're going to provide you a recommendation, how much nutrients to apply. So there's 2 philosophies. The sufficiency level is just feeding the crop. So at least get the nutrients off of the crop, regardless of if you're really low or not. You're not trying to build the soil test level. So this would be the most economical you can imagine. This other philosophy being build and maintain. So build it up to the optimum level where you're not having yield losses without the nutrient applied, and then maintain it. So add a little bit to replace what was removed. And this is what's used by most of the universities. And it's important to provide your planned crop if you want the lab to provide you back with appropriate recommendations, because those recommendations will vary based on your crop. So you get your soil sample back, and the first and foremost priority thing to do is to look at the pH. The lab's going to provide recommendations to adjust that to the ideal or the optimal range. These are some, for grass and clover, we're shooting for around 6.2, and for alfalfa, 6.8 at a minimum. At this range, nutrients are most available. So if you look over here on the chart, I've got 6.0 here. So with nitrogen below 6.0, you're getting less nitrogen available for that crop. Potassium, same thing. You get down in here, and I see soil samples that some of our poor hay fields in Massachusetts with 5.5, 5.2. You know, you look and if you're applying potassium to those fields, it's not going to be available. It's just as available. It's not going to be as efficiently used as if you were up here in the ideal range. And the same with phosphorus. You know, with those acidic conditions, the phosphorus gets tied up really tightly with aluminum in the soil. And so you're gonna be applying it, and it's just not gonna be readily available for your crop. And phosphorus is kind of a tough one anyways for availability, but especially at low pH. So hopefully that kind of drives home that, you know, you want to adjust your pH up to the optimal range first, and then work on building your soil fertility in terms of phosphorus and potassium, and then applying nitrogen as needed. And that optimal pH also provides a conducive environment for the soil microbes. So we're going to look at an example soil test here. This one's from the UNH lab, and UNH uses the Malic 3 like I mentioned earlier. And you'll see, I'll show you a larger view of this, but you'll see down here, the recommendation is for clover, grass, topdress. And the assumption here is that it's predominantly clover, or at least say 40, 50% clover. So if we look at the next, this is kind of zoomed up. And first and foremost, you know, you're looking at soil tests, they're always going to tell you, is it Malic 3 or Morgan? And I'm going to kind of point out that you don't need to know that, but if you want to confirm what extract it is, that there it says it. And so, like I said, first thing, we want to look at the pH. So 5.7, we know we want to be around 6.2 at least. We've got clover out here. So, you know, we're going to want to pay attention to that. Our phosphorus here, 109. Okay, what's 109 mean? Remember, we got to look at the reported rating, so very high. And then also, we can look at the optimum range that the lab is reporting. So 30 to 50 optimum. We know we're way excessive with phosphorus. Potassium, 35 parts per million. Again, we got to look at that rating. So very low. You know, you see, we want to be up in the 170 to 280. So we definitely have a yield constraint there, or restraint. And then our calcium, 291, very low. We want to be all the way to 800. So, you know, definitely some kind of limitations here, although we got plenty of phosphorus. The magnesium, 64, that's in the optimum range, you know, so not too bad with that. So like I said, you don't have to memorize what these numbers are or supposed to be or what's optimum. You can look at this rating scale to keep it simple. Now, what about nitrogen? I didn't see nitrogen on here. Well, the thing is, the labs really don't report nitrogen because it's so variable in the soil with weather and precipitation and moisture and temperature. So we aren't going to be reading the soil test to find out what the nitrogen level is for a pasture. And then what about organic matter? So that's something, I guess they decided not to pay the extra money to get the organic matter analyzed. And I would encourage you to have that run at least your first year. And then if it's low, maybe keep testing it to track it. And when you know it's in a good range, perhaps you don't pay for the organic matter test. So there's always going to be the recommendations. Like I said, as long as you provide them your crop, you're going to get some nice handy recommendations, some notes here. So with lime, we had 5.7. So they want you to apply 2 tons of lime per acre. You see, limit any single application to 2 tons per acre. Now we have our nutrients here. Nitrogen, 0 to 25. Basically, we have clover out here, so we don't really need to apply nitrogen or much if you don't want to. Phosphorus is 0. We had that super high phosphorus, and then potassium, we've got some pounds per acre recommended there due to the low K. So just let's talk about liming amendments briefly. So liming amendments will provide you the calcium carbonate equivalent for that amendment. So that's the ability for that material to raise the pH. The recommendations from the lab are considering, 90 to 100% calcium carbonate equivalent. So you see here, we have dolomitic lime. That's 109%. And then the other, so that has, some calcium and it has magnesium. Now the calcitic lime, Damon mentioned he applied some last night at his farm. That's 100% CCE. So you see that for a pound of dolomitic lime, you're going to get a little more raise in pH than the calcitic. Not much, but, and the calcitic has more calcium, but not any of the magnesium. So limit a single application of lime surface applied to 2 tons to the acre. Some places even say a ton, and I think I even read one maybe said 3, but 1 to 2 ton. And these lime, they act slowly. It'll take 3 to 4 to 6 months and even a year to fully activate and utilize that to raise the pH. Now wood ash, I understand is maybe not as available as it used to be, but that is also a product that has been used and can be used for liming. It's about 1/3 of the value, the calcium carbonate equivalent value of lime, though. So it would take about 3 times as much of a ton of lime to raise the pH to the same level. Kind of the bonus with wood ash, though, is you get these other nutrients. You get your calcium, not as much as the limestone, a little bit of mag. You get a good amount of potassium, though, and a little bit of phosphorus. So these values are going to vary based on the source. It is a high pH product, so I think that's going to what maybe limit you a little bit. You don't want to put too much out there at one time. And it's more soluble and reactive than lime, so you're going to get your pH raised up a little more quickly.
Hey, Kate, we have a question in the chat here, and this is.
Can't see the chat, but.
Sorry, the question and answer. So what does it mean when a soil test reports magnesium in the optimal range, but magnesium base saturation very low? Should we be applying high mag lime? Bill, that's from Bill Fosher. He's taking us to a higher level today.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. So okay. So this shows it. I didn't put my slides in for this, and I won't say that I'm an expert, but I've talked with Tom Morris, and there's been quite a bit of research that shows that the base saturation isn't what is important. It's that there's sufficient nutrients out there, that crops can be grown. The research has shown that crops can be grown and you get similar yields with quite different base saturation levels and ratios between calcium and magnesium. So I don't know, Damon, if you want to answer that.
No, I think that's good enough, and we
right. Yeah, we got
our goal is to keep it fairly simple this morning too. So
okay.
So Bill, you can come after me later. And
okay. Okay, so our sample, we saw we had a recommendation of 2 tons to the acre. So we know that would be about that could be about the 2 tons of calcitic lime. But it would take 6 tons to the acre of the wood ash, which I don't think you would want to apply at one time. I don't have as much experience with wood ash personally, but that's 6 tons to the acre. If you applied it over a couple of years, would provide almost 600 pounds of potassium and a good chunk of the calcium and some phosphorus as well. But we know we were high on phosphorus, so we wouldn't want to be applying those type of rates. So it looked to me like you could apply maybe 2 tons of wood ash to get your pH provide some of the potash, and then balance it off with some regular lime as well. And so the UNH sample, it just called for 2 tons to the acre of lime. Now this one is a sample from Spectrum Analytic, and The only thing I wanted to point out here was the pHs are 5.9, 6.1, and this one's actually specifying, the D here means dolomitic lime. You can certainly apply calcitic lime. Basically, our main goal is increase the pH and have some good amounts of magnesium and calcium. But sometimes they'll specify one or the other. And a lot of times it might come down to what you can actually source locally or, maybe price point as well. So nitrogen, I think we all know it's critical to crop growth and metabolism. Most non-legumes are very responsive to nitrogen applications. And the recommendations for pasture, so I'm using the UVM field crop Rex for some of this here. So they're at a cutoff of 30% legumes. If you have less than that, they would be recommending 100 pounds to the acre of nitrogen split between 2 applications. And if you have more than 30% legumes, so you're getting that free nitrogen out of the atmosphere through nitrogen fixation, no nitrogen is needed. So I think that's the take home on this slide, is really to add legumes to your pastures so that you can, utilize and get that extra nitrogen for higher yields without having to add it through purchased fertilizer or manure. And it'll add diversity, like Damon talked about it in last week's session. So our sample, again, recommended 0 to 25, basically because we had a good amount of clover in the field. So timing, if you really feel like you need that extra forage and you don't have the legumes out there, applying some fertilizer is your option, some nitrogen. So, typically for hay fields, people are applying the 40 to 50 pounds at green up. But if you're in the situation you can't use all your spring growth, which is often the case with us grazers, then you probably don't want to be applying that nitrogen to all your fields, or maybe you just do it to a portion of them. So then maybe you would target some of the later grazings, June, July, but the issue there, we need some rain. So, and another option is a later summer if you want to try to promote more of for your fall growth. And we got our compost, urea, ammonium sulfate as some manure as nitrogen sources. So what about the manure deposited by the livestock? Yeah, that certainly is a great value. So much of the feed, 80 to 90% of the N, P, and K that they're eating is returned to the soil. So you can see here, we got pretty good distribution of manure piles. The urine is just distributed well. And they've done research on this. So you could be a grad student tracking manure pile deposition. So here's the table showing with continuous grazing. So cows, sheep, whoever, just, wandering around the entire field, it would take 27 years to get a manure pile every square yard. Where with, every 2-week rotation, it's going to take 8 years. And when we get up to the moving your animals every 2 days, that it would only take 2 years to get a pile every square yard. So this is really just driving home the value of rotating your animals in frequent moves to get that good manure distribution, to get those nutrients deposited all around versus just in certain areas. So just to get an idea of what's available in your manure that's being deposited or that you may apply, you can have your manure, if you have a manure pile, you can have that tested, or you can look at average values. But we're looking at about 14 pounds of nitrogen total. And the labs are going to report that in the 2 fractions that it exists. So organic nitrogen, that would be the more slowly available, stable form, more so in the solid portion of the manure. And then the ammonium fraction. And this is what's readily available. This is more in the urine and the more liquid fraction. And this is easily lost. So, and then phosphorus, 9 pounds and 13 pounds of K2O. So we're not going to go into detail on, how much of this is available this year, that year, and the ammonium. long story short, with this ammonium, if it doesn't get kind of watered in, or incorporated in the soil, which we're not doing with pasture, a lot of that's going to volatilize and you lose it. But so here I just estimated basically losing most of that ammonium if it was applied in the fall. So you got about 2.3 pounds of nitrogen per ton of manure applied, 9 pounds of phosphorus, and 13 of the K. So with our recommendation, which called for 150 to 180 pounds of potassium, we can determine our 180 divided by the 13 pounds of potash. That's going to give us a rate of 14 tons to the acre of manure that would meet that. So I think that's a realistic spreading rate. So that could achieve your potassium. It's going to give you 32 pounds of nitrogen and 126 pounds of phosphorus. So that's more than we really want to apply for our sample, because again, it wasn't calling for any phosphorus. But so there's definitely a lot of, good nutrients in the manure. Timing, I think fall I feel like one of the better times, because it enables that manure to break down and avoid palatability issues. The growing season, if you can spread it thin, or, if it's kind of a drier manure, I think that can work as well. You kind of have a sense of what your livestock will tolerate, but certainly you don't want to go high rates and smother the grass. So phosphorus, critical for growth, very important. A lot of deficient hayfields around here with super low phosphorus, and it's definitely yield limiting. So I gotta kind of move along here, but these are the sources, and our sample wasn't calling for any phosphorus, but if it was, manure, like we saw, map in terms of fertilizer, conventional, or some of the organic sources, which I just kind of wanted to point out is going to get really expensive if you have to apply organic sources of phosphorus. So like I said, our 14 ton to the acre rate, 126 pounds of phosphorus. Potassium, also critical for the plant to utilize nitrogen and water efficiently. Drought resistance. Legumes need more potassium than the grasses due to their taproot, so they're less efficient at scavenging. You can look at your recommendation basically and apply accordingly. So sources, again, that manure, like we saw, potassium chloride, potassium sulfate, or the wood ash. So our sample was calling for the 180, and I showed you earlier about 14 tons to the acre of manure would do it. And so if you're trying to avoid applying that extra phosphorus, we might want to use some actual potassium fertilizer then. So about 300 pounds the acre of potash would do the trick, or the 2 tons to the acre of wood ash. Yeah, just real briefly here, grass tetany, this can be associated with a high soil test potassium. I don't want to go into too much detail because we're running short on time, but this is basically low magnesium level in the livestock's blood, which is necessary for muscle control. So they'll stagger and can pretty much go down and die if they are too short on their magnesium levels. So it can be a concern on, when you have high potassium levels in the soil, it can hamper, reduce uptake of magnesium. So it's something to be aware of, and talk to your nutritionist and veterinarian. Mostly it's a problem with lactating cows though, and older lactating cows soon after calving. But one bonus, if you add legumes, it generally eliminates the risk. So calcium and magnesium, also very important nutrients. And basically if you maintain your proper pH, usually you have enough of those two nutrients, but absolutely just as important as the NP and K. So just one other example here. This is from UVM in case, some of your producers or NRCS planners are looking at other soil tests. So just another example. Like I said, here we can look at it says modified Morgan. The pH is 6.3, so we're in pretty good shape there. The phosphorus 13.5. Okay, we don't need to know what that value means. We just look at our rating scale here. So 4 to 7, so we're high. Potassium, look at our rating. We're up on the excessive side. So we might be thinking, hey, grass tetany, I got to pay attention here. And then the magnesium and the potassium or calcium are also good. So looking at the recommendation, this one was for grass hay less than 30% legume. So you can see that's why they're calling for 160 pounds of N. It's not saying you have to apply it, but it's showing that typically you'd probably get a yield response from that. But high P and high K, so we don't have any recommendations there. This is that one other lab that I showed earlier, Malic 3. Again, you see that. Soil pHs, phosphorus, we got our ratings. We don't have the bar chart, but at least we got the scale, the medium, Potassium's low, mag, calcium. So I think you get the drift of how to read these. I just wanted to point something out here. So there's quite a difference in potassium recommendations. This is the spectrum, and they both called, and here's the UNH, our first example. So this one's low. This UNH one was very low. Now, if we look over here at the recommendations, we got 333 pounds of K2O called for on the first one, and the second one we've talked about 150 to 180. So you might say, what do I do? if you're going to that lab, if you might blindly put the 300 pounds on, but should I? It's going to cost you $100 an acre at 2018 prices, and this one will cost you half the price. So but the last thing I got here is just to show you about the crop removal rate. So this can kind of be your reality check. So here we got cool season grass, our 4-ton yield. Here's the removal for that yield, 200 pounds of potash here. So, we got the 150, 180 or 333. You'd probably be okay at your 150 to 180, up this 200 range. If money's short or regardless, kind of what you're trying to achieve. This is definitely a building, even more building philosophy than the other one. So utilize the crop removals to help you. And same thing with the phosphorus, a lot more phosphorus being recommended on that one versus this. So you can take a look at the crop removal rate on that. So sample at least every 3 years, adjust the pH first and foremost, add legumes, look at those soil test ratings like I explained, the very low up to very high. Plan your nutrient applications to ultimately reach and maintain that optimal soil test level, which will give you some maximum economic yield, and you won't be kind of hurting down in those low categories. And then consult the crop removal chart as needed to spot check some of those recommendations so that you can make informed decisions. So sorry, that was a lot fast-ish. So that's what I had there.
Hey, that was great. Thank you, Kate.
Okay.
And I don't see any immediate questions, but if folks have other questions, feel free to throw them in the question and answer or chat. There was also, if people want to learn more about base saturation, Laura posted a link in the chat to a SARE publication about that to describe it a little bit more. So, but we wanted to keep it kind of, not get too into the weeds today. So I think we won't dive into that quite so much. Yeah, I think there's a really great place to start, because management of your grazing systems really it really starts with the soil, making sure the soil is in good condition to support what you want to try and accomplish in your grazing operations. So based on kind of what we went over last week and the week before, I want to now turn to, after we've talked about that nutrient management, I want to now turn to kind of, grazing management. Really, what what are we talking about when we say grazing management? And it really kind of runs the gamut. It's a broad spectrum of what can be done through grazing management. And I was on a call yesterday. I'm involved in rewriting a standard for NRCS, the prescribed grazing standard, and there we had in on a little secret. There was a lot of semantics involved and a lot of discussion, but really, grazing management really comes down to managing. The definition that we were kind of honing in on was, managing vegetation with animals to meet a certain objective. And that objective can be ecological, it can be animal based, it can be market based, whatever it is. You, you know it that is a form of grazing management. So it's a really broad topic, and where you and your operations, or for those folks that are service providers, with the people that you're working with, where those people fall on the spectrum of grazing management really really will depend on their objectives. And but in this presentation, I'm going to talk about kind of the low end and then the high end. So I like to put that in context so people can compare where they're at and where they could potentially go, so that they can make at least an informed decision about what they want to do. So as it shows here, you can really improve the resource depending on your management, or you can really degrade your resources. And I'll show that in a little bit later. So you do animals can make a mess pretty quick if you're not paying close attention, or if you've just chosen a more set stock grazing type system. But really it comes down to, what we all want when we're producing animals is, to provide adequate nutrition. And then I would argue that it's really good to protect and feed the soil, and you're feeding the herd above ground and below. So last week we talked about how the root growth can really fuel a massive increase in the livestock below below ground. Um, but as I said, there's a wide spectrum because you have to work within the manager's labor and even the social constraints or market constraints. That those are realities that need to be considered. And so grazing management really comes down to just managing these three factors: the frequency, duration, and intensity. And so, that managing those three variables, we can have almost an infinite number of combinations of how each one of those is, or how all three of those are managed together. And often in NRCS, we are trying to get people to increase their management in terms of rotations and stuff like that, because we want to. There's a lot of benefit in trying to mimic more natural disturbance patterns, and those disturbance patterns are really more acute and not chronic or long term. So you got low frequency, so it doesn't happen often, for a short duration, but it can be fairly intense. So there can be some fairly intense disturbance, but doesn't happen often, and it's for a short period of time. So just to kind of put it in context and how, what I mean by these terms is, when and how often the livestock graze the field or paddock, that's frequency. When they leave, how long they're there, that's, duration. And the amount of forage removed, intensity. So how tightly do you have them packed? That's these other ones as well. Get to the stock density. So how intense it is. And to achieve the greatest benefits of moving towards a system that works best for the animals and the forage base, you really need to control all these factors and ideally move towards mimicking a more natural system, because that's how these systems have worked in nature in the past, and so that's how that's what the grasses are designed for. That's what the animals are designed for. So it's that's how those systems work best. And so this is just kind of a brief overview of some of the different kind of the breadth of the spectrum here. So continuous grazing, set stock, it's also called sometimes. Animals are just put out in a field. Maybe they have a water point here, and they don't move. They're not moved. There's no real rest for any spots in the pasture, and so that works well for some people if they don't have the infrastructure, or they don't want to be out there more frequently moving their animals. But I would argue it's definitely worth trying to figure out how to move yourself up the spectrum. And so, the typical rotational grazing, you maybe have set size paddocks and you just move weekly. It's a simpler form of rotation, or this grazing management. And so that's definitely, in terms of the animals and the forage base, that's definitely an improvement over continuous grazing. You'll see an improvement in your forage base, and probably in the animal production as well. So for example, they're moving once a week, and that allows some rest for these paddocks. And then with adaptive grazing, taking it to the highest level, some people move daily or multiple times a day, and they spend a lot of time observing the conditions out there, and the kind of how those conditions are meeting their goals and objectives. And based on those observations, the paddock sizes are varied as well. So if you've got more lush growth in this one small section of the field, you might make it a little bit smaller. Or if it's maybe got some edge effect and some shade from trees and not as vigorous growth, then you do a larger paddock. And so you can really vary it so you can get the type of impact that you want, that disturbance that you're looking for. And because they are moved so frequently, they get the grasses get a long rest period, and so, as we described last week, that can really be beneficial to the whole plants being more productive, more healthy. And so moving in that direction is definitely very, very helpful. So again, just another nice illustration from the pasture project. We got continuous grazing, and as you go up the scale, you can really increase your livestock density per acre. So as you increase that system, you can get more production per acre, and so that's something that's really worthwhile considering. So and this shows kind of the difference in how much is resting and increase in root growth, and all that sort of good stuff that goes along with it. So this is something that's pretty interesting, and Elena and Rick, I think, talked about it a little bit in the first section, but if you're thinking about animal performance, it moving them more frequently can, as you can see here, can really change how well they perform. So if you're really trying to push the animals to produce a lot of milk, or gain a lot of weight so they can reach market weight, or whatever, um, then moving more frequently so that you got the length of the grazing period, how long they're in a specific area, and then their daily intake, as dry matter as a percent of body weight. So when you first move them in, they are going after the best stuff, and there's a lot of available forage. So Elena talked about the bite size, and so it's easy for the animals to just grab and go, and it's a lot of really high quality stuff. And then and also more frequently moving the animals into areas kind of stimulates them to graze more often as well, or for a longer period of time. Then as you get into longer grazing periods, that the quality of the forage drops down. They've taken the best stuff, and now they're having to go back, and maybe they don't have the biggest bite sizes or anything like that. But then you do see this uptick at the end, that I think is mostly from, some of the grasses are starting to regrow at that point, which is not great for the grasses to regraze it at that point, but it can, the animals can get a little bit of a boost in their daily intake at that point. So again, I mentioned this a little bit, but the the quality, especially when you're talking about high, grazing taller grasses, the forage quality really declines as you go down into the lower layers of the grass. So kind of that take half, leave half mentality, or rule of thumb that I mentioned last week, really, comes through here as well, because you really want to just have them take off that top half, because those nutrients are a lot better in that top 50%. I also wanted to mention, this is something that is sometimes forgotten. Really, when we're talking about management, we're really trying to manage. Well, when we're talking about pasture management, we want to intercept as much solar energy as possible. That's where we're getting a majority of the input for the system is conveniently free, and from the sun. So if you have a pasture like this, look at the amount of leaf area that you have that's available to intercept light. That there's not a whole lot, and so all of this brown area, whether it's soil or dead grass, that is lost opportunity for you, where you could be potentially getting, intercepting that free input for your system. So if you compare that to something like this, uh, you know, uh, a majority of if probably not all, but a majority of that solar energy is being captured by the plants. You've got a really nice mix. This is, again, I talked a lot about diversity last week. Again, diversity comes into play here nicely, because you've got a lot of different leaf shapes and different heights. So you've got kind of some of the grasses sticking up in the very top part, grabbing some of the sun up there. Then you've got some clovers down a little lower, and maybe some dandelion. This may be chicory here, I'm not sure. But you've got a nice variety of plants. That's you might have some white clover. I think I see some red clover here. Red clover is going to be a little bit taller. So having that diversity, managing for that diversity, can really benefit you in maximizing the solar panel that you have available out there to collect that free input that you have. So, you know, when we talk about managing these systems, this is kind of an old slide, but it's a really interesting one, because going back to this, this is often thought of as a problem. Overgrazing. It's kind of obvious that it's getting impacted more than you might want, and it's not great for production. So that's shown here in this avenue here. But undergrazing can also be a problem. And so um, from undergrazing, you get more selective grazing, and you get fertility depletion in some areas and excess in other areas where they like to spend their time. Um, and so both of these end up in species degradation in the stand. You get more weeds, reduced animal uh, output of animal products, lower returns on investment, and then as a result, you end up with a decreased stocking rate, and then if you continue with that, this cycle kind of continues. So if we're talking about kind of continuous grazing, whether it's uncontrolled or this undergrazed or overgrazed, this continuous grazing, the the same plants are often grazed every 7 to 9 days, and so if it's undergrazed, they will leave some of the plants ungrazed, or a lot of their less favorite plants ungrazed. Or if it's overgrazed, then they're just going to be hitting everything that they can get, and grazing it down tight, like you see here. And then duration is long. The access to the plants is long enough to severely graze the regrowth multiple times. We talked about that a little bit last week in terms of, and Carl talked about it actually quite a bit. Um, uh, how damaging that is to the grass's growth potential, and your production. So that can really limit the production that you get off of the land there. Um, and then intensity, it's moderate to high, especially in the places that they are grazing. If it's undergrazed, it's moderate to high in some, and then almost none in other areas. So what can that look like? So you see all these patches, and then graze down tight in between. And then undergrazing can look like this. This is a lot of thistle throughout here. That just not enough impact is put on these fields, but you can see some areas where it is grazed down a little bit closer, where they prefer to graze. So this type of system, while it may seem easier in terms of management, because you're not going out and observing and moving, it requires, to kind of maintain at least a decent system. It requires a lot more management supports. So whether it's going out and doing some spraying, some weed control, you're gonna end up with weeds coming up more often in these types of systems. So you're gonna have to either be okay with that, or do something to address it. So that's sometimes done with spraying. It's also sometimes done with clipping. So And I would argue this is a little too low to clip if you are looking to to help your grasses out. But clipping a bit higher if you can would be better. But clipping happens oftentimes. If there is at least some rotation in the system, then the people often go in and clip the weeds down, so maybe they get them before the weeds go to seed. Um, uh, that would be ideal, so it doesn't perpetuate the weed seed bank. But um, people like to have a nice clean aesthetic as well, so going out and clipping the fields can make that look better. But again, this is going to be a lot more necessary in this um, lower intensity of grazing management. Um, so in terms of the management of the actual animals, it it will require more, kind of like I said, more support management that often may not be recognized as kind of, if you take a whole system view of it, these other instances of management that are inputs to the system may not be accounted for when considering whether it's worth doing um, a more actively managed grazing system. So another thing that might happen more frequently as well is doing some reseedings, because you end up losing the desired forages more frequently. They just can't stand up to the extra defoliation that happens. So on the opposite end of it, you have controlled grazing. You end up getting that good fertility, maybe even some fertility buildup, that fertility that Kate was talking about with that even manure distribution. If you can maintain an optimum stocking rate, you end up getting non-selective grazing and much better utilization rate. So that would be, the animals would um, be less selective as animals get tighter in their paddocks. So those daily moves or multiple times a day, the animals are kind of crammed in there fairly tight, um, because they don't need a huge space for the amount of feed that they need for that very short duration of time. But what that does is it creates kind of a competition effect between the animals, and they go in and they grab and go rather than look around, kind of sniff around to see. Well, I don't prefer. I'm not going to prefer to eat that thistle or anything like that. The animals will just kind of grab and go before their neighbor gets it, and so that can lead to more even utilization and species improvement, because if you don't want, a lot of plants that are deemed weeds because animals won't eat it actually have pretty high nutrient contents and are decent forages if their animals are willing to eat it, or um, and end up eating them. So you can get species improvement, whether that's having some of those less desirable forages fade away, or maybe your animals just start utilizing them more and getting better utilization of everything. So then you get good weed control. You've also got your desired forages they're treated better and they can compete better. um, and then you get the increased animal outputs, and then you get increased stocking rates, and this cycle continues. So just again, that's low frequency, short duration. So low frequency. So a lot of people that are kind of at the higher end of the management spectrum in terms of how the level of management they put into their animal management on the forage base. Um, they only get, you know, maybe 4, maybe 5 grazings a year um, off of a particular spot, but that's the density there is of forages is a lot higher, so that's perfectly adequate. And so the duration is short, and so you know you move them quite quickly. So usually the tipping point is around every 3 days for the forage regrowth. So if you kind of keep that in mind, if you can move every 3 days, that's when things start to really snowball into a beneficial effect. And then you know how intense you graze it, leaving more residue leaves more of that solar panel for collection. And then you know what's the stock density? So do you trample some of the residue into the soil? So what can that look like? You know, can look something like this. Or to the, you know, some people in some cases do some tall grass grazing, and they can group their animals up, and you know, a lot of times this is fairly well trampled down by the end. So um, that you know, I guess I'll just go back to this for a second. So that's just kind of an overview of how kind of the kind of spectrum, the higher end of management versus the lower end of management input on the spectrum of this grazing management. And so you know, I really there's a lot of benefit to uh, paying closer attention to how your animals are impacting those grasses and moving them more frequently um, as a result of many of the things we talked about last week and what we've gone over here. Um, that said, you know that there are some pinch points that occur even in the most adaptive grazing systems. You need to be ready for, you know, summer slump and drought situations, managing your shoulder seasons, spring and fall. You know what happens if you have excess rain, and you know managing the spring flush. So some people end up deciding to manage the spring flush by taking some hay off. Some people end up going out and clipping that spring flush ahead of their animals, so they can clip some of the pastures to set that grass back just enough, not a whole lot of input or impact, but set it back just enough so that your animals can catch up to that really rapid growth in the spring. But one of the most important points about this is it's great to have these, it's really important to have these plans, but having what your trigger point in terms of when to switch into these different plans is important, because it's easy to say, well, you know, it is getting kind of dry, but maybe we'll get rain next week, you know. The eternal optimists in some of us, you know, hoping for some rain, so maybe I can make this last you know, a week more or something like that. It's worth doing that analysis ahead of time to say, okay, if we get to this situation and I'm running up against, you know, where I don't have enough forage in, you know, starting in a week and a half, I need to start thinking about how I'm going to switch to you know, what my summer slump plan is, or you know, whatever that is, so that we don't you know, there's a kind of a default habit of many folks to kind of delay just a little bit more, and so having those trigger points it helps you not delay past the point of no return in a way. So um, so with that, there's a whole lot more that could be said about grazing management and managing things, but I hope that gives a really good overview about kind of how the animal side of things comes together, and with the grass management side of things. And so I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the chat a little bit more. So and just if there are any questions, it looks like there are no questions. So Kate, you and I did a perfect job here, I guess.
You answered all the questions before
Good
they
job.
were even asked.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess if there are any, okay, could you post the source paper book for all those? Yes, I can
Damon, if you want to
do
give
that.
it to me, I can send it out with the recording to everybody who registered.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
That I can definitely do that. That'd be the easiest way. So
And I'll get that out in the next 24 hours. I promise.
yeah, yeah, great.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, thanks. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Hey, Damon, thank you so much.
yeah.
Thank you
Not a
so much.
problem.
My
Thank you,
pleasure.
Michelle.
And
Yeah.
thank you everyone for attending. Next week, it's going to be how the NRCS can help you with your regenerative grazing. You can go to grazenewhampshire.com and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. We look forward to seeing everyone next week.
Take
All
care.
right.
Oh,
See ya.
bye.
Bye.